Hello, I'm male feminist Anders Bloom, and because all lives matter here at Thorin's channel, I give you a big welcome.
Right, this is going to be episode 64 of Counterpoints. It is right before the playoffs of the major. We've had the first two phases, stages, whatever you call them. And what I think's interesting about this one is I thought the first thing we should probably talk about, because now we have like the first set of data, is what it's been like to actually have a major that had this change in the format where, you know, the initial seeding for each phase was done by the teams where they did the peer review. And for anyone who doesn't notice, ESL absolutely did apply exactly how they promised. So for example, in the first phase, the new challenger stage or whatever that's called, I noticed that like Vici, for example, did one ranking that was really, really off. Like I think they put like Fnatic way lower than everyone else. Ironically, Fnatic did actually end up bombing that stage. So maybe Vici are actually the true secret overlords, but in the context of the ranking, because they'd put them way lower than everyone else, theirs was excluded as far as I can tell. So that part did all work as ESL said. Then, obviously, between rounds, depending on if you won or lost the game, you affected your ELO overall, which then, in theory, could tweak which matchups you got, right? Obviously, we only have the data set from one tournament, but my initial thoughts are, it seems actually like it worked exactly as you would have hoped when you heard the premise. Because when I look at the tournament, like it was very rare I ever looked at any of the matchups and thought, how are these two teams playing each other? Which I used to get all the time when it was the random draw on Swiss. And then the other part is when it got to those like elimination type matches, they all felt fair. Like those last ones for the last round felt very reasonable as to who was playing who when you look at the context of the teams and their route through the tournament. So I don't know yet whether there'll be another one that'll show me there's some little loophole I haven't noticed, but it seems actually like it's gotten pretty flawless.
Yeah, I think I agree, and I think that's a big key. Is this is probably the first major since Swiss system was brought in. Well, even if you go back to GSL, that we always had these conversations of, was the seeding fair or is this random draw fair? And I haven't seen a single conversation about how a team got screwed on their draw. I think there's a couple of conversations around like, you know, teams getting like an easy path, but not like in a bad way, because you still at some point have to play a hard opponent. Or, you know, like I think it was Vitality played a bunch of easy teams leading up to some of their BO3s right at the end. I think they kind of got an easier path, but that's just the way the seeding works. And ideally, you want the seeding to work that way. Like I think Astralis as well had like a pretty relatively easy 3-0 path.
Sure.
But again, first seed, you should. I think that the important thing is, and you kind of touched on it there. I think one, I remember when Swiss system originally was announced, everyone fucking loved it for like the first three events, and then you kind of start to see the flaws. So I think we have to wait a little bit and hope that more tournaments utilize this, or if the next major utilizes this, that'll be cool to see if there's any kind of mistakes that crop up. And then two, and this one I don't think has been mentioned a whole lot. I really enjoy the fact, and this is, I guess it's kind of minor, but I really enjoy the fact that you can kind of, based off knowing the ELO numbers heading into a draw, like who you're likely to play if you're a team. So remember, like the old Swiss systems, some of those teams would play like the first game of the day, and then they just have to sit around and wait for the random draw. And then all of a sudden it's a scramble to start preparing for that opponent. With this kind of ELO system, and also the nature of Swiss where you can't play a team twice, you can very easily kind of get a sense, or at least like bring it down to like two teams that you're likely to play against, and get a jump and actually have a chance to prepare on some level for a team, which I think is actually pretty crucial moving forward.
Yeah, for people who don't know, so I can remember quite vividly some of the events that use Swiss. As you're saying, the real killer was if you had the first game. Like if your game was the 10 a.m. game, well, the problem
and you don't find out till 11 p.m.
Yeah, exactly. That was it. You'd be waiting until the end of the day for the draw. And then the problem then is you can only start like really preparing in a proper Swiss system, especially like, for example, in the first round where obviously half the teams are going to be available. You can only start prepping for that team once the draw happens at 11. And so, God forbid, your next game is also another 10 a.m. game because, I mean, where are you going to fit in the 8 hours sleep plus the preparation? You're going to have very limited time. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I also do leave the caveat there, like, because actually the Swiss system is the great example, isn't it? Like, when the Swiss system first came along, like the analogy I would give, because I think it's quite a useful one if you're a CS player, is it's like if you're one of those people who uses a low sensitivity and you ever put your sensitivity twice as fast, initially it'll feel really fun because you'll be getting all these like for example, no one will be backstabbing you. You'll get like, exactly. You'll get like a 180 and kill a guy you'd never normally be able to kill, or you'll do like some mad flick with a shot that's like, wow, holy shit. And you'll think for like like a second, like, holy shit, my aim's better. Like, why wasn't I using this forever? But then obviously what ends up happening is you just haven't played with it enough. Eventually, you miss enough of the kills that as a low sense user you would have gotten with your spray that you're like, actually, this is give and take. Like, which do I want to choose here? So I agree. There might still be some little tweaked loophole, but I was just shocked by the fact that it's the first tournament, and not only did it like work better for the seeding, like I felt like it was a lot fairer. Like if I look at the teams that went through who were the underdog teams, so the obvious ones at this tournament would be like Renegades and ENCE, the teams they had to beat, that was very fair. Like they didn't get any easy path. Yeah, this wasn't like some of the past ones where famously people have kind of like just fluked the opponent they got and maybe only had to play one really good team. I think it was very fair. Also, the other part I thought that was cool, by the way, was because if you are top seeds like Astralis and Team Liquid, and especially if you don't get massively upset and have to play some lower team, what happens is we haven't had to see those teams generally play the top teams.
Yeah.
So as a result, it's even sort of in a mad way setting the tournament up almost the way you'd want it, like thematically. Like obviously, there's no way Astralis and Team Liquid, in theory, are going to meet until the final. Like that's actually exactly the way you'd want all the stories to work.
I think, yeah, and having the best of threes for both deciders and elimination kind of prevents that from happening. And I think also having those BO3s in the elimination match, like watching ENCE was the first time at a Counter-Strike tournament since I think maybe like the old like ESTA Global Challenges before they were even bought out by ESL, that you could feel like, I felt like that was like a lower bracket run. You know, like they're sitting there at like what 0-2 or 1-2, and they have to win like two best.
I think they were 0-2, yeah, after the best of ones.
And it's just like, oh, they have to like actually grind their way back into this, and for them to do it, it puts it in so much better context and so much better excitement. And they had to do it by starting out by beating Big, who went, yeah, they were 0-2. They had to beat Big, who was one of the teams that was favored heading into this to get into the top 8 that a lot of people had picked to get there. So, I mean, no easy paths was there, which is really cool. I think I really liked that part of it. But yeah, early returns in this are good. I still think there's a fundamental flaw with Swiss system in general that the payoff comes so late. Like the first day or two of matches, there's just no real importance to them. It feels, you know, like I feel like it takes a little bit to like build up and get to the exciting points with Swiss. And that's just a problem in my opinion with the format, but certainly the best of threes alleviate that in a big way.
Sure. Because actually along those lines, like one team I thought we would briefly touch on, because obviously a relevant team we've discussed many times, is one of the teams that went 0-3, and it is NRG. Because if you look at the teams, right, one of the things I thought was interesting when I was doing my pick'ems for this particular round is this round really showed the state of current Counter-Strike, which is you had a couple of teams at the very top. At this point in time, you could even argue maybe only Astralis and Team Liquid. You had like the very dominant team, so it's like, you know, for them not to make it through, it'd almost have to be like some paradigm-shattering change had happened at the event. Then you had the teams where, you know, it's pretty like the NaVis and the MiBRs probably were going to make it through. FaZe Clan, like these teams, you'd figure at least two of these three would make it through. The difference is, after that, we aren't just talking like, yeah, there's a few teams can compete. It's like almost everyone could. That was ridiculous. You had like a solid like 6, 7, 8 teams where you could really go a lot of directions on your pick'ems on those. And yeah, in the end, it ended up that a lot of the big names made it through. But there's certainly worlds in which, you know, the Avangars could have been in there. And so as a result, I did find it quite hard to predict them. But as a result, this is why the NRG one is really damning to me, because it's not like when, so okay, the best analogy would be where Mouse Sports last major went 0-3. But the difference was that was the old Swiss system with the old randomized element. They did actually play a couple of hard teams, you know, like there was some like, there was no excuse, but there was some context you could make it that made it look not as bad. When you add the context into NRGs, it looks even worse because they had a very favourable seeding, because they were only playing the lower level teams, because they had a best of 3 on the last match. Like, these things all combined are killers. And then obviously look at the team they were playing on that last best of 3. It was the one that most people had for 0-3. It was complexity. Yeah. So, like, I can't find a single, except for I guess the only angle I could go with to give them any vague excuses, it's some of their first major. That's it, you know, some of them have never been here. But even then, like, as a team, they're just so much better than what they showed me here.
I was fine using that excuse that it's the first major, because if you look at, I was having this conversation, if you look at the trajectory of NRG, even going back to last year, the first Pro League season is when people really started to notice how good they were getting. They had all those qualifiers at the beginning of the year that did so good online, and they played in some of these online qualifiers, and they failed a couple of those online qualifiers, and then they succeeded in a couple of them, and then notably they went to Star Ladder, or they went to, they went to Sydney first, and they bombed out. They were terrible, and then they went to Star Ladder, and they made it to the grand finals miraculously somehow. But you could see during their progression, they were failing every step of the way. Like, they hit an obstacle, and then they learned from it, and the next time around they were better, and that happened repeatedly a couple times with them. But for this one, I hesitate to use that excuse because you can use it for like Nip and Avantgarde, but like once you get to Complexity, this is a team that they should be supremely confident against. And it's not a knock on Complexity in any way. I think they showed a much better level than people thought they would be at. Yeah. But if you're NRG and you have been destroying this team in the qualifiers and in online leagues and, all across the board for the last year, this is a team where no matter how nervous you are heading into a major, you should feel supremely confident again. Not underestimate them, which I'm sure they didn't at an 0-2 match, but you should be so confident that the jitters and the nerves of a major are severely lessened. So for me, that Complexity one is the most damning, especially because it was a BO3.
Yeah. By the way, I noticed Valde just messaged us there in there, but whatever. We'll just ignore that for now because I'm assuming he's not free to do the rest of the
shit. You can add him into a call if you want. I can read the message.
Yeah,
you wanted to go there.
We'll pause that. If he wants to come on, we can come on. We haven't done much. It's only 10 minutes. Let's see. Let's ask him if he's free. He said he can be on in 15 minutes if you haven't already gone live. Do you want to wait 15 minutes?
I would rather keep going and just add him in 15 minutes when he's ready, because the later we go at this hotel is like once the StarCraft people show is done, this internet is going to get completely shot.
Okay, right, yeah, let's do that. Let's just you and me continue then. Then when he comes, we'll just chuck him in. I'll edit all this shit. Right, wait there a sec. Wait there 1 second. Let me think. Yeah, well, the other thing as well to add is, this might sound like a counterintuitive point to make, but if they had just turned up, played that best of 3, and it's like, right, this was just the worst day of our lives. We turned up, nothing worked, we got shit on. It's embarrassing to lose Complexity, but you know what? You can always add in that thing of like the domestic players, they're not as intimidating. That factor. The problem I have is it was a really close series, so actually they weren't even terrible in this one. Like, this was this is one that was up for play, and there's a world in which this is exactly where, if you're a quality team, like I hope NRG is going to become as time goes on, you're supposed to close this one out. Because you look at Complexity's lineup, that's not a real team in like the traditional sense. I mean, you look already, they're already been trying to make changes to the lineup. They've got a makeshift team.
Well, they already did, didn't they? It's already permanent. I think it's already announced that they just signed Tarek for Fugly, which is, I think, is going to be fine. But I mean, at the same time, firepower is not with this team. This is what's astounding. I mean, first of all, fair play to Complexity fair play to Stanislaw, because if he's not having like the tournament of his dreams, they probably still don't beat NRG, even if they're close.
Yes.
But you have Breeze going 61-52 in that series against Complexity, and you didn't win. You didn't even win a map. Like, that's they're both overtime. Yeah, it's close, but that's one of your win conditions. Have Breeze go nuts. Cirque was quiet this event.
Yeah, he had a bad major, mate.
So
again, if you're as young as these guys are and you've never been at a major, I'll give you some passes. Like, for example, right up until almost the end of the majors, he was being pretty quiet, especially compared to what he was before. But again, I'll give you a break at your first major. Like, so not everyone's going to hit the ground running. That's actually why the people I consider the real prodigies are so rare. It's pretty crazy to be that good if you're 17, 18.
Oh, it's mental. It's mental that you can just step in and do that and just kind of ignore the pressures. But yeah, so, I mean, I think the other thing too is this exposed. I feel like NRG there's this like weird aura around NRG and I'm a Pet, where they seem to be like presenting themselves to the public as like this like tactical mastermind. Because remember when he was with Optic and they had that upset at E-League, so many people credited I'm a Pet for those wins, like, and the work he did with NRG or Optic. And it's like, that's fair play. But when you watch NRG play, they don't do anything tactically astounding. So on a certain level, it also makes sense. This is a team where they are powered a lot by individuals. They do the basics and they do them pretty well. But Ethan, Breeze, and Cirque just fucking wreck people. And if you're going to have a quiet tournament, Ethan had a couple good games, but overall not a great event. Cirque had a quiet event. Breeze I thought Breeze was fine, but if your individuals are going to be lacking, this is kind of what happens. So I think it kind of removes some of the aura of mystery and like kind of like the excitement around energy, and I'm a pet specifically as like this tactical outplaying coach in a way.
It's like that for me was just a killer though, because like if you look at it, it just shows how majors are different. Like it does just bring a different atmosphere mentally, because you even see it now. Like the craziest thing is now you can even see it extends to minors. Like you get people who do fail minors, even though they're like much better teams than a minor level field. But it's because it's in their head the whole time. Like, fuck, if we lose this match, we're out the major. Like it really gets to people.
I don't even think it's, well, I mean, there's certainly that element, but I think the other side of the coin and the other thing that gets factored in is think about all the teams like that don't go to every single big event throughout the year. This major is everything to them. So, I mean, even the minors are everything to them. So when you come into this major, Renegades has been here in Poland boot camping since January 3rd. The Asian teams, this major is everything to them to be able to make it into the top 16 and then have a chance at getting to the top 8. So you see all these other teams that put in so much work and prepare. And if you're a team that's coming in who's been top 8 at some of the big events throughout the year, you're preparing for the Liquids, the Astralises, you're preparing for the NaVis and the FaZes. You're not looking at fucking Vici Gaming and Windstrike. And yeah, those teams are going to upset some people because they've been busting their ass and they're saying, not necessarily let's anti-strat, but let's work. They work probably well harder for a longer period of time leading into this major than some of the more established teams. And that's just the fact of it, because to a certain degree, it means more, if that makes sense.
Sure.
That's why I've never bought like when players come into like the majors and they say, the majors just don't need much. I don't mind some of the players saying, there's not a whole lot that differentiates the major from other big events, but don't tell me the major doesn't mean anything to you.
Sure.
I didn't see any leading into this one, but it has happened in the past. And like, that's a crock of shit. So just like, is what it is.
The funny thing about that exact topic though is I get what they mean. What they really mean is like, there's things I want changed about the major. So, for example, they want the prize purse higher or they want the format changed. Like, these are actually things that are totally legit concerns to have. And if you're a pro player, I even would say, find a way to make these concerns, verbalize them, put them out in the public. Like you can do some good. The problem is, like, they've kind of used a little bit of a dirty trick of implying, like, the whole major itself doesn't mean as much. It's like, come on, homie. Obviously it does, mate. Like, if I gave you a choice right now, you can have 2 non-major titles, any you choose. It can be ESL Cologne, like a really big fucking event, or you can have another major title. Everyone's choosing a major title. Come on. And I'm talking about, again, the reason I purposely picked that example is the prize money might be twice as much if you pick the non-majors. You might actually get to beat more teams. It might even be more legendary. The difference is it's not going to be a major, is it? Like a major's remembered forever.
Yeah, no one's picking fucking WESG in their like $1 million prize pool. No one's going to pick that one.
Yes. I mean, the funny thing is, Moses, that alone surely proves that the concept's nonsense, because to this day, like 70% of the top pros don't attend WESG. And we all know it's real money as far as we can tell. They've paid out. Like, that's mega bucks. So if it really was about money, then you'd be at every WESG, every Star Ladder. Like, these are the biggest events in terms of prize purse. So, yeah, that was just one where it's like, come on, don't shit a shitter. Like, we all know what you're really saying here. Like, you don't have to bullshit us. Because I definitely think that's also a factor for something. That's actually why, believe it or not, I was actually ready if they'd have done this Tariq move, because personally I think they were already thinking about the Tariq move regardless of whether they went out at this point. I think this might have happened even if they'd have snatched a legend spot and gone out. I think it's still a world in which you'd make this move, trying to make an upgrade, try and make yourself a better team. And the thing is, even if that had happened, I wouldn't necessarily be against it. Like, we can debate whether they pick the right person. You can have that debate all day long, how you see a team, etc. But I do think this is almost a fitting end for NRG. Like, as you said, they did kind of have this thing where it's like their ceiling went up as the year went along, but it's almost like it went up from them bashing their heads against it over and over again. So while on the one hand, you want to make the storyline satisfying, you want it to continue, the next major, they make top 8 and then eventually they're in the semis. But it's like, to be fair, if I look at this lineup, this looks like they had quite a long time together. They got pretty good, and I have to say, a lot better than I ever thought they would be. But I do think that, I don't think they were going to bridge the gap to whatever the next level was. Like, I don't see them becoming at the level of the NaVis and the Team Liquids of the world.
Now, here's the question about NRG, Duncan. does history repeat itself? Do we get the craziness where it's like they choose to drop Fugly and pick up Tarek, and then they realize Tarek can be an in-game leader, so they drop Daps, move Tarek over to in-game leader, and then
that was the first thing I thought about. Don't worry, because you know a lot of people don't know that detail, Moses, which is. This is why keeping track of the news is so valuable, is when Tarek joined Optic, initially they actually caught Stanislaus for like a week or a few days. And initially it was going to be because, you know, Daps was the in-game leader. So it was like, right, Daps is the in-game leader, Tarek's joining as like a star player. And then what happened was, initially, I think it was Tarek even who was like, I want Stanislaus back actually. And then Stanislaus came back and then Daps was the one who kicked out. And then obviously they went on to great success, so I can't blame them. But if you do look at Daps' career, he has like, it's like I made the joke already last year, which is like when he finally got the NRG team to that Star Series final, I was like, it's going to be a real shame when FNS takes over this team, because it's like that is exactly what you were sort of waiting for, weren't you? Like the team to be like, well, thanks, but no thanks. Like
it's like what if Groundhog's Day was actually a horror Daps, and it just keeps in this cycle over and over again. I hope it doesn't happen, but I could see it.
Sure. Right, even though this will contextually make no sense, because this isn't like a fucking WCW broadcast from the 90s. Like, whose music is that? Oh my God, is that Valde? Like, you know, normally guests don't just join a show while it's underway. So we won't explain any of the circumstances. All you need to know is, yes, this has turned from a 2-man episode to a 3-man episode, and we're all happy for that. So no need to ask why. No conspiracy theories. It just happened, okay?
There was something with a pickle.
Exactly.
That's all you need to know.
It's kind of like if you ever see a desk and then it's like, you know, let's say like Yanko and Sponge, and then, you know, there's like, it's like the banter looks a little bit awkward and they look almost as though they might have been arguing in the green room or something, you know. They never have been. That's all a lie. We're all the best of friends, and let's let the show go on. The show must go on. So, a little Easter egg there for people in the industry. Right, so, Valde, we've already discussed actually one team so far. All we discussed was the NRG team that went 0-3, and that was more like, you know, the context was obviously really bad for those guys. So, what I want to do on this episode, just to give you the brief, is like we'll talk now about some of the teams that some went through, some that didn't go through, and then we'll do a little bit of preview for the playoffs. But like we won't go it's insanely in depth on those ones. You know, there's obviously 4 whole series to be played. There's a million factors you could go with. So what about this then? A team that I definitely want to talk about is one of the teams that made it through, but was actually kind of like underdog. They were on the borderline, which is the Finnish team ENCE. Yeah. So this is one of the teams, obviously, that got through at the very end. They went 0-2 before they got through. They won all the best of 3 series, though, right? I would assume this is a team you practice against, right? You know this team pretty decently well?
Yeah, I would say so.
What were your expectations for them at the major? What would you think of them as a team?
Overall, I actually had them in my pick'ems to make the top 8. So I was actually definitely expecting a top 8 finish, and I would say anything from there would probably be a bonus to them. But I also know Alu, for example, just became a dad, and he had to go home after the first part of the major. So there might have been some chaotic circumstances around the team that probably, I guess they didn't practice for the days he went home. But yeah, I was expecting a top 8 finish, and I think they're definitely one of the teams who's been on the rise lately. And yeah, it seems like they have a good mix of players and some good staff behind them.
Yeah, they struck me, if you watch them in the beginning of the Legend stage, they struck me as a team that, like, I think the nerves hit them pretty hard. Because they look completely different in their 2 matches that they lost versus the 3 that they won. Even the big game, they looked a little bit shaky. Yeah. But their players are so, like, if you go back and watch that Hellraisers match on Dust 2, like that B bomb site just got demolished like over and over, and it was weird miscommunication. So I think the pressure just got to them, and then like they snapped out of it. I think that first win put a little bit of life. Yeah, go on.
And I also saw, like, I didn't see all the games, but from what I could tell, and the little I saw that Alexi B, the in-game leader, was actually playing really well, and he was the guy who carried them home in the final game. And a guy like Sergey has probably been underperforming.
He had pretty bad stats so far, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So if he like can get his shit together, you know, and go big for the playoffs, they should be fine, honestly, because they have fortunately had some players who's been able to step up in the games when they needed to. So if the star players can come online, I guess it's looking bright for them in playoffs, actually.
Sure. Yeah, that's actually the thing I would say that, like, first of all, if you remember last year when they won that Star Series tournament, like Sergey was the MVP of the whole tournament. Like most people, when they look at this team, they're going to know Sergey because he's won the MVP, and they're going to know Alu because he's obviously like a legendary figure in the scene. But I'm with you. I actually think like the undervalued person in the team is the in-game leader, because if you look at this team, it's not like it's just a super mix of players who are just fragging everyone's head off. Like they're a proper team. And in fact, if you look, it's really hard to blow this team out. People aren't just crushing them 16-4 on their map, you know, the opponent picks or whatever. Like this is one of those teams that can grind you out. So I'm actually very impressed with them, like on a fundamental level. I also give props, you know, if someone like Sergey has a great performance, I'll give him individual props. But this is definitely not a team, like actually, we'll contrast them with the team Moses referenced, Hellraisers. If you watch Hellraisers, there are games where it's just like, right, well, they won that game because Voxic just went mental and killed everyone with the AWP, or, you know, Issa had like 30 kills. This is a team that plays real Counter-Strike. I'm quite impressed.
Yeah, and also they seem to have a decent map pool. And from what I can tell, they also seem to do the most of the veto phase like pretty decently as well.
Yes.
So they're definitely a team who seems fundamentally sound, and also they have, as I said before, a good mix of players and staff. And I think that's really important when you're an upcoming team that, especially like them, has a lot of young players. And just overall, also outside of the game, I'm actually quite surprised about Alexi B. He seems like a good leader who's able to take charge when the team is down and maybe not talking and communicating so much. Overall, he just seems like a really experienced in-game leader, even though he's quite young. So I actually see some of the same tendencies as, for example, Glaive has, who's like actually quite young, but still able to take leadership over his team. And that's really important, especially in the big tournaments.
Sure. Especially because, like, I mean, Moses, think about how many episodes of this show we have basically bemoaned the lack of in-game leaders. Like, that's one of the things where you don't get, like, newer guys coming through. So that's why, actually, I think to tie it into another team we can talk about is obviously Renegades. Like, that's, for me, one of the coolest storylines of this major is that the two kind of underdog teams who made the top 8, they both share the same qualities, like, nice, like, blend of players, proper Counter-Strike. Good. Notice both of them have good map pools, veto correctly against the opponents. Therefore, they give themselves a good chance in every series. I mean, another team, again, where no one would expect Azza's going to swap to in-game leader and actually be good at it. And he even seems to frag exactly the same way he did before. It's ridiculous.
I mean, the most depressing thing about Azza is we'll never know what the answer was of why he couldn't do this for like the past 4 years, because he switched to in-game leading and he just got glasses. So we can't ever know.
You can't know which it is. Okay.
Yeah, we got to start taking one away, take the glasses off and see what he does.
That's where Moses' actual plan is. Like, if they get to the semis, he's going to steal his glasses, and then if they bomb, he's like, right, there you go, my bad, there's the glasses back. Like, I just had to know, bro. I had to do the control group.
It was for all of us. I think one of the cool things about Renegades too, I think as we go on, I think if this team stays good, like if they stay like they're going to go deep into tournaments and do top 8s at a lot of the big tournaments coming up in the future, I think you got to start talking about Casada as one of the better coaches that we've had in this team. I already think he's like underrated. I think the question now is how far can he help to bring them? You know, I really liked him originally when he was in Renegades. It was just, again, that was when apparently Azza didn't have glasses. So who can actually know? It all comes back to the glasses.
Obviously, the joke now is like the next tournament that we have in CSGO, Xizt just turns up with huge jam jar type glasses on, like, hello, boys. I've been thinking about what you saw that episode, Moses. You know.
Is it only the in-game leader that has to wear them, or is it like...
I don't know this scenario. I mean, I feel like Moses has even taken that stereotype that, you know, wearing glasses makes you look more intelligent. And it's like, it worked for Azza, you know. He turned up like, I'm the in-game leader now. Well, let me see what I've got in my notes here. Oh, yeah.
Listen, I stopped wearing glasses, and now I'm not on the analyst desk, so, you know.
It does actually check out. You're right. It does. Not bad. That does actually check out. You're right.
Yeah,
Maybe I should buy Katie in a pair.
Well, not touching that one.
I know, exactly. I almost feel awkward for that, yeah. So.
It's all right.
I know there are so many... There are so many experiments that need to be run. So many experiments.
Exactly. Well, that'll be when the Refresh / FC Copenhagen money has really gone to the next level. Is when they're doing like an actual full physical checkup on all parts of you. Like, yeah, I'm afraid your sight is deficient, sir, by -10 degree. Like, we're going to send you to our guy. Like, fucking hell, this is going a bit far, guys. We're just playing Counter-Strike. No, we've got to get this to a top. All you need to know is when you know, like those famous things where you can't be in like the Air Force or whatever if you're like colorblind. It's like when we get to that level for Counter-Strike, we might have gone too far, boys. Like, I feel like we've set a standard that's unrealistic to live up to. So, okay, what about the Renegades team then? What do you think, Valde?
I've, like everyone else, I've been really surprised about them. They've just seemed to really have found their groove, and it's actually a bit surprising to me because we actually practiced them quite a bit up until the major, and they didn't, to be honest, strike me as a team who would make the top 8. So yeah, overall I've just been really impressed by their performance, and like ENCE, they've also had a variety of players who's turned up at the right points in time. So I mean, JKS has been playing well for quite some time now, and Asa seems to actually, he reminds me a bit of Nitro, like the way he plays, and also he's the one who tends to step up in the big games, and we've seen that from both Nitro and LXCB as well. So yeah, really surprised about the Renegades, and they seem to have like good defaults, good tactics, good set executes, and so on. So yeah, really surprised about them.
I think the biggest surprise about Renegades is like not just that they look good when you watch them play the game, but like it's like their resilience, because that's where they always collapsed in the past. Even if they were having like the odd good game here and there at tournaments, they really struggled at closing games, and they also struggled at coming back. And
yeah, they made a lot of comebacks. Yeah.
Against Astralis, that was like a 12-3 half that they had against them, and they came back from it to force overtime. Like that's some wild stuff. So they're super cool to watch play. I haven't nailed down what exactly they're doing strategically that has made them so much better, but I mean, they're again another one of those teams. They have Ozza and JKS who have been to every single big tournament that there is to go to, and they failed in all of them. And then you get a mix of young guys, and now all of a sudden we're seeing these mixes of experienced players and young players come in. And it's almost like it brings like a different look, like a more a fresher look to the team on how the young guys play. And I mean, those guys, Liaz and Gratisfaction, aren't playing like they're new.
No.
Which is wild.
But if you look at a guy like Liaz, I'm just looking at his stats, and I know you can't tell everything from stats, obviously, but to me it seems like when he was playing in Order, which was his previous team before he joined the Renegades, he seemed actually, if you look on stats, to be a guy who you would consider a star player. And if I look at his stats in Renegades, at least
they're pretty poor for this major.
They're actually pretty poor. But if the guy is able to transition into a more supportive role, and that's what the team needs, because I assume that JKM and JKS has a lot of the star player positions, and Gratisfaction is obviously the AWP. Then if this guy can do a decent job and like keep a 1.0 rating as a support player who can, like, I don't know if he communicates well and stuff, but then that's actually fine. Like, I don't mind having one of these guys on my team. So he seems to do a decent job for the role he has.
I haven't seen every one of their game, but from the games of Renegades that I've casted at the major, I know like he is one of those guys who won't like ever stand out, and then he'll just have like some massive impact round. Like he'll just make some kind of a play, like in like a force buy round, he'll have like a double kill with the CZ, or like the critical double kill that really opens up the round. So his impact seems to be pretty solid despite having not great stats. But yeah, I mean, you have to say everything's fine. Jacob's got to be one of the coolest stories in this major, and it's a shame that there's so much stuff going on at a major that it can't be highlighted more. But from being a star player and then going into that FaZe lineup, like he was touted, I remember back in 2015, he was incredible. And then he went into that FaZe lineup and couldn't really get anything done. Then he's been out in the woods for a year, and he comes back in Renegades, and now it's like the guy's a whole new player. It's awesome to watch that.
Sure. And I can actually tell you, he's someone where, like, I forget the exact context, but I remember, you remember the major, it was ESL Cologne, the one where FaZe was in that group of death. And it was like them, SK, G2, and then Fnatic was the other one. Yeah, that was it. It was Fnatic and SK were the ones that got out, right? When they were in that group of death, people still thought they were a decent team, they weren't ever making the playoffs, but they had some solid players, obviously, that FaZe Clan team. And that was actually a time where I remember, because I thought, like, in FaZe Clan, they go nowhere. All they do is get paid and they're never making any playoffs. People like Jacob were the ones that I was talking to. Like, if you ever want to go to, like, a team like an NA team, a Cloud9, a Team Liquid, we can set this up. Like, it can happen for you if you want to do it, mate. Like, if you want to make a player change. And the thing is, the reason why I bring this story up is because even though Jacob was someone who was open to the idea, he would basically just sort of implied that like he was just mega depressed with his play. Like he just thought, what the fuck's the point of my career? There's just no point. So like I guess I could do that, but why bother? It's just like, which is really depressing to hear, because when you hear that, you just think, right, we'll give up all hope for that team ever being good. So I agree with you. Like when I saw that he was obviously the guy who ended up being removed by Karrigan because he picked Kiyashima instead for FaZe, and then he went to that team that was like the terrible Dignitas lineup, which was like him and Fox, and like obviously that lineup was going nowhere. You would, if you had to place your bets then, you would say we're never going to see this guy at the top level in the pro scene again. Like he's going to at best be playing for like, a Tempo Storm or something. He's going to play for some tier 2 or tier 3 team, maybe have like some name value, but you're never going to be relevant again. Whereas now he's in the top 8 of a major. This is a big time turnaround.
That's also one of the cool thing about Renegades, I think, is that I think pretty much everyone had kind of set expectations for this team, in the sense that if they had a really good tournament, they could maybe make top 8, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, seemingly, they're legends at the major, and that's like a huge thing, I think, both in terms of confidence, but also your perception of yourself as a team, if you know what I mean. Like it really seems like the next step for them, and I'm actually quite excited where they can take it in playoffs, because as of now, they've been looking pretty strong.
I'm also with you as well, by the way, Valde, on the angle on like, I mean, you brought up Pliaz, but I would say generally, actually, that's like a very, it sounds counterintuitive, but it's actually a very positive sign for Renegades that they've looked so good over this major, but their stats are not jumping off the page. They don't have a lot of players that are like the top rated players. Like, when it's a fluke is when like, someone's third best player has like stats that are like way better than his career average should be. They've actually done like normal stats basically here, but in the game, it doesn't matter. Like, you look at them as a team, they look so solid in the game.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, Moses. I give some of the credit to Kassad, because just look at the periods when he was the coach of this team and when he wasn't. He was basically for both of the best periods. Like early last year when they were also like pretty solid again. They were like on the rise, That was his prime as a coach for them. Yeah,
he seems like a good coach, because like I know he has a lot of focus on vetoes, and he also seems like a guy who's able to give the players some confidence, In timeouts, he seems to have a lot of say, and he's just this kind of hype guy when he needs to be as well, kind of like Sonic on Astralis, you could take, for example, or these type of coaches who likes to hype up their players and not make them so quiet if things go against them, So I think he's a really important piece for this team.
I think, like he probably has a good feel for like the competitive aspect and when his team needs to calm down and when they need to hype up. But I think also that's going to come in with the younger players as well. They seem to be more energetic people. And I know from working with Sponge so much, that's one thing he mentioned. Like when you see all those clips of the old school Australian teams and you see all the clips of like Chad screaming and everything, they got to a point where they realized that that's not a sustainable energy level to have, is that constantly hyped up, constantly super energetic after rounds and everything like that, and constantly screaming. So they dialed it back, and then what they found was they were too quiet and too like not zoned in, and too much just very laid back and everything like that. So they always struggled to find that middle ground. And I think if you have some young players who are just naturally going to be always a bit more energetic and always a bit loud and more hyped when you win a clutch, and then you have Kassad behind you who's super experienced as well, able to bring it back down, I think they found a pretty good mix for that.
Yeah, but why was it he left Renegades in the first place? Like,
I actually did an interview on my channel that was about this, where basically, as far as I know, I think he just thought like, we've tried everything in this team, like it's gotten to the end. And if you remember, he left and went and joined like Valiance, where he was with like other people from his region, like Nico's cousin and stuff. So I think he just was sick with where they were.
Okay, it's just because it's actually pretty rare from what I know that players will actually take a coach back, if you know what I mean, because in their mind, if they tried anything, then why would you take him back at a later point in time,
I think I had to imagine
it's a positive thing for him, but my point is that it's actually quite a rare sight to take a coach back, now that we just saw MiBR do it as well with Zeus, but it doesn't happen very often.
imagine from like all the talks, and this is all like outside speculation. I haven't like actually asked any of the players, but I had to imagine there was like a rift in that team where like some of the players really liked the way Xizt wanted to play the game and really liked his opinion on certain things, and then another half of the team like didn't really like it or wanted to go a different direction or wanted to try something completely different. Because if you look at all the interviews, like everyone's like a lot of the Renegades players have mentioned the fact that Ozza and Xizt work really, really well together. So if I had to guess, I would imagine it was Nifty as still a young in-game leader having a difference of opinion on how the game should be called or how the game should be played than Xizt, and eventually Xizt was just like, "There's no point in me being here."
Yeah,
and when Ozza came back and was like, "I'm going to be the in-game leader. I really like things. Blah blah blah. Come back." I would have to imagine that's kind of what happened. Again, speculation.
Yeah, I guess so.
Also, they are the highest. They have the highest rate of purchasing the AUG across the entire major. So there's that.
Makes sense.
Have you seen the AUG stats are actually really, really weird. Like Renegades and Liquid are the two top teams in terms of buying AUG on their CT side, and they obviously both went through. But then NRG and Big are next. They obviously both went out 0-3, and then G2 and ENCE are next. So like, there's this really weird thing where it's like FaZe made it through, and they have the lowest. Astralis made it through; they have the third lowest. NiP is the fourth lowest.
I don't think you can base the org purchasing stats off of who made it. No, not at all. Like who made it.
I don't either.
I
just find it weird that it's so scattershot with the teams that make it through and the teams that don't. I just find it like a weird back and forth. But I mean, I've seen that conversation. I think it's complete bullshit of like teams like people saying, "Oh, they only made it through because of the AUG and blah 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 blah," and things like that. And that's always a stupid argument to make.
Yeah,
it's not that powerful. It's everybody calm down.
No. I mean, for that whole, I even think that's like almost like a fake outrage. Like we've had plenty of stuff in CS:GO that was really OP. I don't even think the weapon is OP. I just think the pricing is OP. I think if you just put the pricing up a little bit, you can keep the gun exactly the same. It'll make it fair. Because to me, the big problem with that weapon is just its place in the economy. It's not what it could do in the game. Like there is no player who's like twice as good now because they've got an AUG when they had an M4. You know.
It just helps you. It helps players, it seems, hold angles really well. Instead of where like an M4, you have to constantly jiggle peek and then eventually find a timing to take a fight. It seems like people with the AUG are just much, much better at holding angles.
Yeah. Well, as someone who comes from CS 1.6, I don't dislike that, Moses. I think that's actually allowed. It's all right.
No, but it does get weird when there's 4 or 5 AUGs on a CT side, and then you're watching a game of just counter-terrorists just literally crouched, and it's not the game that we've been playing for the past 4 years. So I think the increase in price would be great because you have to imagine instead of everyone buying an AUG, it's going to be like 1 or 2 people, and it might just be positional or map-based on who likes the AUG or the M4, what kind of a round they want to call. So, yeah, I think the price will be a good start if it goes.
Right, let's pick another team to talk about then. So a team I actually want to ask about is, what are your thoughts, Valde, on Team Vitality?
Interesting team.
You would want to talk about this.
Interesting team. We lost to them at the minor, so we got a chance to play them there. And overall, I'd say that they're a team who's improved a lot, but also who has relied a lot on the performance of Saiwu. That's quite obvious, I think. But overall, I think they still lack a lot as a team. I think they're a team who's not really... They're not a good tactical team, in my opinion. They're better if they can like snowball the game and make a lot of scrimmy plays or whatever you call it. And then they're a team who seems to rely a lot on their carries. So if Apex has a good game or if Saiwu has a good game, they can have a chance against anyone. But they also have some players who can have some off games. And if you want to make it to the top 8 of the major, for example, then that's probably not good enough in terms of individual level. But still, they're kind of a new team, so I will give them some room. But I think unless some of their other players starts performing, then they probably hit their ceiling, I would say.
What do you think, Moses?
That's the hard part. Like, I agree. I think they obviously rely on Saiwu a lot, and I think some of his performances have really allowed them to kind of get away with bad performances as a team, just because like he'll bail them out. Like the Inferno game that I casted comes to mind. I forget who was against, but Saiwu went absolutely nuts in the second half.
And also
and
he's the
of the
rookie,
game.
by the way.
Yeah,
Of course, yeah.
I think the problem is, and I think it's the issue with the entire French scene. I don't necessarily know what the solution is, but even it even treads into something you'd say about G2, where it's just like, you expect if you're going to have NBK, RPK, and Apex, and then, Shox and Kenny S, you throw them in there as well. Like, I don't know what's happened to all the French veterans where they have such a diminished performance from what we're used to seeing. It's like all of them at the same time just like took a step down. And especially with Vitality more so than G2, like they have three of the veterans. So all three of them can't consistently play at this step down level. I think all three of them have to get better individually if they want to make this work. Because even the same with G2 as well. When you see Vitality have a good game and when you see G2 have a good game, you say, okay, I can start to form like some of the things they've worked on. I can kind of see some of the changes they've made in the different areas of like teamwork and strategy that they've worked on and improved. It's apparent, but then that completely disappears, maybe the next time. And that inconsistency, like Valde said, is kind of due to being a new team. You always see those inconsistencies with newer lineups come in. But the consistency in individual performances is what scares me the most about them. Because I feel like without some kind of level that from NBK, RPK, and Apex that you can rely on, you won't see the good stuff often enough. So I think for me, the French teams, just looking across the board, I'm just like individually, I feel like those players need to do better. Like, because like the strats aren't ever going to show themselves. If everyone's shit, you could call the best strategy in the world. And if no one's getting the kills, it's not going to work. So you have to have that level. And part of the problem of Vitality having Apex as one of their star players that they rely on is Apex throughout his career has notoriously been very up and down. Like he's either godlike or he's kind of, and part of that is born from the fact that his roles in most tactics is as an entry fragger, and entry fraggers are always going to be very up and down in their performances because sometimes you just have a game where the timing isn't right and you just get wrecked 15 rounds in a row on the T side. So they're in a tough position, but I'll give them more time as well, but I wasn't like overly impressed by anything other than like the occasional good game out of ZywOo.
Yeah. Like I would echo a lot of these sentiments. Like, first of all, obviously, they are massively carried by ZywOo because even if you can say, yes, they're like, for example, in the previous phase of the major, obviously NBK actually had some amazing games, but the difference is then he absolutely regressed back to the mean for the next phase. So then Apex took over. He had a couple of really good games. But the point is, it's always ZywOo plus someone. There's no other person who's doing really, really well. So, go on.
If you look at stats, it's like ZywOo is running like a 1.40 rating, and then the drop-off is like massive beyond him. So as of now, it's probably been Apex who's been the second star player of the team. But also, as we all know, his role can be pretty up and down. So if they hit a rough period and ZywOo is maybe not performing to this 1.40 level, then I think the drop-off could be massive, actually. And I don't know if I see a guy like RPK or Alex, the new guy who came in, as a player who can take charge and be the star player in these rough games against the top 5 teams in the world. That's why I said I think they probably hit their cap. But again, if they have a good game and ZywOo and Apex has a really good match, then they can perform against anyone, I think.
Yeah, I could see this team ceiling to me, like, and this is kind of more of a guess just based off what I've seen. This could all change in the coming months if they improve on some way. But it feels like they're one of those teams who might have that like one-off tournament where they'll get a deep run. I don't think I would ever see them winning an event, but they could have a deep run in an event. But other than that, like, I don't think they're going to be able to consistently challenge for like a top 4 at every single event they go to, or consistently challenge to get into the finals or challenge for the trophy. They just seem like a team who can have the occasional good run if everything kind of strikes right at the correct moment. And after that, we just have to see how they improve over the next couple of months.
Yeah, and also I'm still not sold as NBK as an in-game leader, to be honest. Like, he seems a guy who's really capable of being like the secondary caller in a team, because he obviously is quite a vocal player and he probably has a lot of good ideas. But I'm not sure the responsibility should be on him alone. So yeah, that combined with ZywOo probably maybe having a drop off in performance when he faces some better teams, because he has not, let's be real, faced a lot of really good teams yet, then I don't really see this team, for example, becoming a stable top 8 team in the world. I think they'll be around top 10 or just below.
I think the problem is just the construction of the team. Like, you look at the players, especially now we've seen a few lands, and it's like first of all, like we were saying, if you just want to look at the fragging aspect, like Zero's amazing, so he's already doing more than he probably actually should, especially when you consider he's the rookie. Like, he actually already performs way better than you should expect.
It's really impressive.
But then you look elsewhere in the team, as we said, it's not realistic to expect Apex to be like dropping amazing numbers every game. He's going to have to ride the rhythm of the game, and then beyond that, wait a minute, your in-game leader's the other person putting up numbers. Like, that's not sustainable. Like, it's just unrealistic to expect that to continue. So I also agree, like, NBK is an in-game leader. It's not that I'm against the concept. It's like, I'll give you the joke, right? There's a very famous joke that people in Britain know where supposedly when Gandhi was like boarding a plane or something, someone asked him like, oh, what do you think of some quote like, what do you think of like British civilization or some mad line like that, you know, like and he just said something like, I think it would be a very good idea. It's like, that's the way I feel about NBK as an in-game leader. Like, yeah, it'd be a brilliant idea. If you could show me it at any point in time, I'm totally up for it. But at the moment, like, I'm still waiting. Like, when does it start? Because at the moment, you can tell this is a guy who played under Happy, because he is way more in line with the Happy style of playing CS than he is the Existence's style. And yet what's bizarre is, if you ever hear interviews with him, you'd think that this guy was like night and day poring over tactics, like he's thinking about every aspect. Like, this is why I feel like you've got to be very careful when you use certain adjectives with players, because individually, I think NBK is a very smart player who understands a lot about the game. But that doesn't mean he understands a lot about the game and is very smart about being a tactical in-game leader. Like, those are two different worlds. It's like you're saying about like secondary caller angle. Like, I've no doubt someone like Zipnix probably has a great overview of the game, understanding of like dynamics between roles, like how a game would play out. But would he be a good in-game leader? I have no clue whatsoever. I couldn't even guess. Like, I don't even know that it would suggest he would be. Maybe actually it would wreck his game and he'd be a mediocre in-game leader. We can't really know. So, like, when you've got such a specialist role as in-game leader, like, fair play to MBK. At least he's trying to do it for real. Like, it tilts me more when people fuck around and do it for 2 months and then quit. Like, you were never going to learn the whole role in 2 months, mate. But put it this way, if he's ever going to tick over, he's still got a way to go to become a good in-game leader, I think.
Yeah. But you have to give him, it's actually quite impressive that they made it to the major in the first time.
Sure.
Or in the first try. Like, so far he's actually been performing above what I would expect, and the things I've seen from this team and the improvement in terms of like, they can play quite a few maps and they seem to have the roles pretty set in place. So if they can keep grinding out good results and keep improving, then I'm all for it, as you say. But I think they've kind of hit their ceiling.
I think it needs a little bit more time for a final verdict, at least for me. Even with thing, because I there's something weird that happens, I think, when a player who's never been an in-game leader before becomes an in-game leader, and I feel like most of them start out by trying to make things too complicated. Like, you start trying to think of all these cool tactics and cool strategies and cool smokes that you can integrate and everything like that. And I feel like people overcomplicate the game more than it needs to be. Like, Counter-Strike can be won by pretty simple tactics, and that's always a good starting point for a new in-game leader, is run like the really simple things and just get them down really well, and then you can start adding wrinkles in afterwards. And I don't necessarily think that, I'm not saying that like NBK is doing that, but I think there's a lot of factors when you switch into becoming an in-game leader that you don't realize is like a factor. Like, we went out today into Poland, and I was in a shuttle with Sean and Jordan, and nothing. They were talking about that time Nothing tried to be the in-game leader in Cloud9, and Jordan starts talking about all these different things that he didn't do well, that he looks back on, and he's like, I didn't really understand that this was going to be this way. I didn't really understand that this is how you do this. And he's like, if I had a chance to go back and be that in-game leader again, I'd do so many things differently. So I think the role of an in-game leader is so much more than just the game stuff, that I think people sometimes just take extra time to get into it. And for me, for NBK, I've always thought he's a really smart player. I've always liked the way that he thinks about the game, so I'm willing to give that a little bit more time.
Yeah.
G2, on the other hand, I'm done with.
But also there's also a decent chance that Saibu gets poached at some point if he keeps performing to this level, I guess. That's also something you have to take into consideration if you want to talk about longevity of this team.
Well, especially because at the moment, they basically use him as a crutch. Like, he has to drop monster numbers. That's like win condition 1 before they have a chance against any top team. And as we said, it's not even like they've...
a reasonable win condition either.
No. And we haven't seen it happen yet against the big togs. Like, if he could carry like that and they do it against like NaVi, FaZe clan or something, the best of 3, that now I'll start to consider it like a real condition, just like you do with NaVi. Like, I know it sounds ridiculous to say Simple has to drop those numbers, but he does it every time. So it actually is a legit win condition at this point in time. So it's still a way to go though before I can put Ziwu in that category.
Yeah, but the thing that's good about Zywoo so far is he seems to be this hybrid player from the get-go, and that's not a lot of players you see this from.
Sure.
Like, he can AWP, he can pistol, he can rifle, and I think you pretty much only see people like Coldzera and Simple and so on who can do these things. So the fact that he does it so early on in his career and has taken up the AWP and the rifle role in a hybrid style from the get-go is actually really impressive to me, and that's why in my mind he's one of the players who's pretty much destined to be top 5 in the future, even though it might seem to be like not happening in the upcoming year maybe, but in the future I definitely see him as a top 5 player in the world.
Oh, the trajectory is very good, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'd agree. Oh, by the way, Moses, on that point you made as well there, like about the fact that like people who become a new in-game leader often overcomplicate things. Like they think to themselves, like, oh, I'm gonna come up with all these brilliant strategies. Like that's to me exactly why I'll give my best example for that would obviously be like MSL, because if you look at their team that North had last year, where it wasn't that great a team, obviously, and a lot of the placings weren't that great, but the few times they ever had good placings, they usually had a pretty good T side. But the thing is, if you said that to a pleb, they would be like, yeah, but they're not even doing anything special. Look, he's just running the same strat like 5 times and a half. It's like, you know, the job of the in-game leader is win the round, right? It's not do some like it's not a magic. Yeah, he's not a magician. He's not trying to do some like mad misdirection and then a guy flies in from behind. No one could have known, and the most genius flash ever. If he can pick a simple tactic that works and identify it works and execute it simply, that is your job. Like, it's not all about the, you know, if you're doing a movie version, it would be about the amazing strat. The day-to-day is just pick the most effective strat we can do now and what we can actually do as well. There's another aspect, you know. Like, another good thing is when you start out as an in-game leader, odds are even if you had a genius complicated strategy, can you pull it off? Execution is really fucking hard. Like, I'd start with something very simple if I were you. Make sure people just know exactly what they're doing on this round and then let them figure it out. What would you say on that, Valde? You obviously played under MSL in this example.
I think the thing I like the most about MSL, also now that he's gone and you can like reflect upon it, is that I think you undervalue the true value of a system. Like, having a system, and a system is not something like, now that I played under him, I didn't feel like we had a system, but after he left, I actually kind of feel like we did. So when he was in-game leading, like, the thing I used to say is that his idea may have not win the round, but at least he had an idea, and that's something that most in-game leaders actually don't have. They don't always have an idea, but MSL was always good in terms of always having something to call, and he would never like ran out of ideas, and that's actually really important when you're in-game leading, especially in the big games, because a lot of these good teams now, like FaZe, Astralis, and so on, has really good CT sides, so it's actually really easy to grind to a halt on the T side. Sure. And that's where he was really good at always having an idea of what the other team were doing and what we should do in the important rounds. And yeah, that's probably what made us win Stockholm as well. That's probably the most underrated aspect of an in-game leader. I don't know how many times like I've seen like a team like win like this miraculous like last second, like going into the 30th round and they win like 16-14, and you talk to him afterwards and the in-game leader's like, yeah, I had no fucking idea what was going to work. I just had to say, like, you just can't say that to your team, can you? You have to at least make them feel like you have an idea. Like, even if you have no clue and you just literally did like strat roulette in your brain, like, you have to make the rest of them feel like you think that strategy is going to work. Yeah. Like, even I remember like Astralis beating Virtus Pro in that train game, and they did it with like that outer rush on Tech Nines. Like, talk to those guys, and Greb's like, yeah, we don't have a fucking. That was a Hail Mary for sure. Yeah, he was like, we didn't know what to fucking do. All we had was Tech Nines and like 4 flashbangs, so I just called it outer rush, and it was like, holy shit, that's how you won that fucking major, you piece of shit. Not bitter. Definitely not bitter. Yeah. By the way, Moses doesn't actually hate Astralis. He just hates that he lost that bet. So I always have to point that out. So he doesn't come off too unreasonable there.
It seemed a little bit better. No, that's also another thing I have to say. This is why people don't realise. I've never thought MSL was like the best in-game leader. I've never bigged him up as like the fucking greatest. But what people never gave him credit for is like Valde's saying now. Like he's a person where even if they lost the game, if you asked him like, well, what were you trying to do in that game? Like, what did you think was happening? There'll always be a logic to what he says. Like whether you agree or disagree, he had a game plan in mind. He knew what he wanted to do. He probably tried to execute it. Sometimes some of the ideas were even good that didn't work. You know, like there was a lot of benefit behind that. Like the reason why I bring that up though is because when you tie it back into the angle of people who are becoming in-game leaders when they weren't, I would pinpoint that as the moment that breaks those guys. It's all well and good the first few months when people give you a lot of leeway. You've never done the role before, or you know you're doing it and it's fun. Hey, I'm getting to influence the game now, and I'm getting to do different things in the game. But the moment you have a game where you play it and all the initial things you do go wrong, and the opponent is doing amazingly, and you literally realize halfway through the game, like, I actually have no answers. Like, I'm all out of every idea, and the ideas I do have don't work, and what am I supposed to just think of a new idea on the fly? That moment, I think, breaks the guys who try to become it, because they just think, like, what the fuck's the point in this role? Like, let someone else do it. I'll go back to being a player. It was a lot less hassle. And I don't blame them, by the way. That's why I think people who are really good in-game leaders are worth their weight in gold, which is why it's very interesting that ENCE and Renegades have managed to get into a pretty good spot in that sense, even though they kind of maybe did it accidentally or out of nowhere, you know. Right, okay, what about this then? Pick another team that you think would be interesting to talk about, Valde. Who would you like to talk about out of the field that was here?
I would say MiBR, just because of the recent roster changes.
Yes.
Seem like a pretty interesting team to me.
So obviously, this is a team where this is the first tournament we've seen them with this lineup again, and they haven't actually had to play that many games. So very, very limited data set. What are your thoughts on them?
Overall, my thoughts are actually quite positive. We practiced against them prior to the major, of course, and I just think that with the recent additions of Taco and Xizt, they just seem like fundamental good people to have in their roles. Like, in my opinion, you don't like Xizt as a coach can never be a bad signing, in my opinion. Like, he just seems like such a cool guy who like knows his shit and knows what to do with a team. And that's really underrated, as we don't have a lot of good coaches in the world, in the Counter-Strike world in the moment.
Sure.
And Tago also, as a player, just seems to be super sound. And I know he's probably a guy who's communicating really well. And yeah, seems to set up people like coldzera in a good way. So this new MiBR team, I think you're going to see also from the games they played so far. From what I can tell, they went back to their old playing style, where they play really slow. They try and feel out what the other team is doing, and then they will try and run a lot of late game fakes, where they will give space to people like Fur, who will then again create space for people like coldzera to close out the rounds. So if MiBR can get this slow-paced game going in the playoffs, I actually see them as I guess it's not a dark horse, but as a potential winner of the major.
What about you, Moses?
Let's just throw out that 16-3 loss to Cloud9, because that's a bit of a nightmare. But I think that game was weird because they said, that they were so nervous heading into it, which is crazy. I actually was not a big fan of this roster change when it was announced. I think I remember actually saying it on our podcast, that I think that these reunion tours that people try and get into, the teams break up for a reason. And I think that's the problem. And I think there's a unique way, the more I've kind of talked to the players and everything, that they get around that. And part of that is because Phelps might have had issues playing in the team the first time around, but then you spend a year playing for the other Brazilian teams and you realize like the salary you're getting, the quality of tournaments you're attending and being invited to, the opportunities you have on MiBR. And then all of a sudden the problems will disappear pretty quickly when you come back into MiBR. Obviously I've always been a big proponent of Xizt and Taco. I don't need to go any more into that, but more than anything, I don't know if they have I don't know if I'd say they're going to win the event, but this team is going to get better as this tournament goes on. So the more that they're able to survive in this playoff bracket, I think the more dangerous they're going to get. Like what we see in quarterfinals, we're going to see them well more dangerous in the semifinal. And if they make it to the final, they're going to be very dangerous. And remember the statistics of this tournament, coldzera's number 2. What is it? It's like it's Device, coldzera, and then Simple in terms of statistical performance. So that's quite a fucking stacked top 3 MVP kind of race we have going on.
Yeah, the thing is, obviously, they ended up on the bracket side alongside Astralis, right? So if you look on paper, I guess a quarterfinal matchup, if you told them before the tournament started, if you had a quarterfinal matchup against Renegades, if you're MiBR, you're actually pretty happy in my book.
Like, you're taking that every day of the week.
Yeah, every day. Like, sure, Renegades has been playing pretty well, but if MiBR plays to their potential, I think they're definitely locked for semifinals. And then probably they'll run into Astralis, and of course that's going to be a really tough game, no need to say that. But if you'd put MiBR on the other side of the bracket, I actually had them as a favorite over Liquid to made it to the final against Astralis, I guess it would be. But yeah, that's just my opinion. I think they'll do pretty well and be a lock for semifinals at least.
I think that's actually a really funny point, because I think if you look at the brackets, I think Astralis as the top seed actually got the hardest route to the playoffs of any team, or hardest route to the finals of any team, just because NIP for whatever reason is one of those teams that has been able to challenge Astralis even when it doesn't seem like they should. Like that Astralis Nip game, I'm not going to call an upset. I have Astralis winning that, but that's a little bit of a banana peel for Astralis. Like that NIP team, not only are they playing dangerous, especially if Dennis plays the way he did in their qualifying series,
Sure.
but they've been able to challenge them in the past. If you go back to DreamHack Stockholm and some of the Blast events, they've been a dangerous team for Astralis. So that's kind of like a little bit of a nightmare situation to go NIP and then MiBR, another team that has challenged them in the past and also has championship pedigree in it. So, I mean, I think that's a very difficult route for Astralis to the grand finals.
Yeah, NIP also took a map from them at the ECS finals, and they also beat them at the Blast. That's best of one though, but yeah, still, I would definitely still favor Astralis. But if you look at on the bright side, NIP has been having some players who's been performing really good so far. I think Forest and Rest definitely stands out. And yeah, if the other players can do their job, I guess they have an upset potential. But yeah, I must be honest and say I definitely have Astralis for the semifinal.
It's hard to go against Astralis at this point.
Yeah,
but I will say,
I would have
for
to
the future,
see it before I believe it.
I'm excited for these playoffs because I think this MiBR showing, if they continue to improve in this tournament and then the tournaments to come after this could be an incredible year of Counter-Strike, where I think MiBR, if they start reaching their potential, which is kind of like the if, like everyone knows what they have it in them, we just have to see if they're going to be able to kind of rekindle that magic, which I have started to believe that they will after watching them after their loss to Cloud9. This could be the best year of Counter-Strike yet if we have, because right now we have the two teams, Astralis and Liquid, that seem above the rest of the pack. Navi's kind of right there. But if Astralis gets that, all of a sudden you have 3 teams that are right at the top. We have 3 different teams who could be challenging for finals.
I actually have an exciting question here. If we take the Astralis NIP game in the quarterfinals, what do you do in the veto phase if you're NIP?
Well, the interesting thing is, one of the reasons, like, I agree with Moses, like, from their past history, I get why they have, like, a good matchup against them. Obviously, they used to beat this team when it was the old cause many years before. Plus, I would even add in, like, psychologically, one thing that the veteran teams who used to be number one have going for them, it'll sound bizarre, is first of all, teams that used to be really good never fully believe that they are what their ranking is when they get way lower down now. Like, if you ask Forest or someone, like, right, are you guys, like, whatever, I'll just guess at what they are, like the 9th best team in the world. They're going to be like, nah, like, yeah, we might not have had a good few months, but if we have a good tournament, we can beat anyone. Like, that's not just something they say in interviews. They actually do believe that. And then also they tend, as a result, when teams are like newer teams go to the top, they tend to be more skeptical of them being the best than the rest of us are. So, like, I bet early on, you can't really know this, but I bet early on they never really bought that, like, oh, Astralis are just going to dominate the whole scene. It's like a lot of the old teams didn't believe that. But then you also have to add in, half the problem with trying to get teams to beat Astralis last year was that Astralis also, because they had an amazing map pool, there was so few teams could even just map pool wise match up with them. Like, obviously people know Team Liquid had literally one of the worst map pool matchups you could have. There was basically nowhere they could go in the map pool. Whereas actually that's the thing about the MiBR guys, and especially NIP, because NIP play both Overpass and Train. They can play Nuke if they have to. They've played Cache. They have all the maps that you need basically to potentially get a decent veto, like you're saying. So they have a lot of options as to where they go in that.
But where do you go?
We see Nuke.
The first ban? Yeah, exactly. I think we see Nuke as well, because if I look at the overpass stats in the previous 3 months, they're 1-6 with a 14.3% win rate. And yeah, even though Astralis' best map might not be Overpass, that's still not good enough to contend
Sure.
Astralis, I think. So I think it's probably going to go to Nuke as well. But if you just look statistically, they're not going to win Nuke, in my opinion. So already there, you're down 0-1, and then you have to win the next 2 maps in a quarterfinal against Astralis. I don't think that's going to happen, to be honest.
I don't think Nip will pick Nuke. I think Astralis
No, I don't think
will
they'll pick it either. But
yeah.
I'm just saying, like, per default, you're going to be down at least 1 map.
Yeah, that seems to be the general trend of playing Astralis. Although I don't know if, I mean, I think NIP can beat Astralis if they get, you know, a little bit of luck in those games in the right conditions, and they're definitely not going to shy away from Nuke. That's just going to be a fun series. I have Astralis taking it as well, but I'm just really, especially if you have like Forrest has had such a ridiculous event, like it's brain dead how good he's been.
Yeah,
maybe edit that
Rest
one out.
as well.
It's weird that, because if he was doing it all the time, you wouldn't need to mention it, would you? Wouldn't be such a rare and special moment, would it?
Listen, don't bring your little Twitter fights and don't project them onto me.
I'm not actually blaming you for that one, but that is like an example of something where what people don't realize is on topics like that, they think I'm just trolling. Like, that's actually what I actually consider my role in the community. It's like, if everyone's building up a narrative that's like got all sorts of holes in it, it's my job to be the little prick who comes along and pops that motherfucker. Like, It's like I say, like the idea, if Forrest really was like a top 5 player in the world, you wouldn't go mental when he has one good map, would they? No one would. Like, we don't do that when Simple has one good map.
Yeah, have to talk trash when you don't know anything about Counter-Strike, right?
Of course. What else are you going to do, right? So, like, here's the team I want to know about is, because the matchup that is the most ridiculous in the quarterfinals here is NaVi and FaZe, because I think a lot of people were out on both of these teams. Like, obviously, NaVi, it's in part due to some factors that are a bit weird. Like, they have done a lot of very weird stuff on social media and interviews and stuff. But FaZe Clan, I know most people thought they were crap. Obviously, they were doing pretty bad at this tournament. That's an interesting matchup. What do you think of this one, Valde?
Ooh, I think whoever loses that game is probably going to be really disappointed.
Yeah.
And that definitely seems like the quarterfinal to watch if you're not taking the Astralis NIP game. But I'm actually very 50-50 on this game, because I think FaZe can pretty much only improve from here. And if you look at the NaVi side, I actually think that we've seen some improvements from some of the other players. Like, I don't think it's just been the Simple show so far. And as scary as it sounds, I don't think we've seen the true level of Simple yet. So if he can be even better for the quarterfinals, then it's looking really scary. But I honestly have this game as a 50-50.
I think that's the best way to describe it. I had NaVi looking terrible at this event, although I did acknowledge there is that weird fact where if everyone in the team is like, oh, we're breaking up after this major, like, everyone's going to play super loose and everyone's going to be playing for themselves, which is going to improve the individual levels of guys like Edward and Zeus, who are no longer trying to think for the team. And then you just let your stars frag out. Like, I think they've hit that. I think they got into that mode, because that NaVi team that we just saw in the Legends stage and everything looked much better than the NaVi that we'd seen for like the 3 or 4 months prior.
I think
which is weird to say.
I think my NaVi win condition, if you could say so, to make it like far into the tournament, is if Electronic goes back to the level he had at Cologne and so on last year, because he's been a bit lackluster lately, right? I'm not
even sure it matters, because Flamey's been so good. Like, Electronic is great to have going off, but like, that was, remember, things that seemed so scary was like Simple, Electronic, and Flamey in one team was just like, that's ridiculous. I think you need Simple and you need one of Electronic or Flamey, and this team's going to be dangerous. And also, especially in a quarterfinal against a FaZe that seems like they're a little bit lost themselves. I think both of these, like, I think both of these teams came in with like a similar thing where it looked like they were just on this downslide. They were getting upset by teams like that they shouldn't be, that, you know, you felt like they shouldn't be losing to. And it was like, so what shape are they going to show up in? And for NaVi, they showed up looking better than everyone expected. And for FaZe, I think for a good portion of this tournament, they showed up worse than people expected. So I halfway, the only thing holding me back is because obviously knowing Yanko so well, from talking to him, I get like a very positive picture of how things have been going on improving that team, which is kind of like luring me into like a false sense of what FaZe can do and everything. But if you have to go by just isolate how they've looked at this event and ignore all the other external factors, NaVi should be taking this one. Like FaZe look like hell.
Even though I agree, like of the two teams, Navi's looked way better at this tournament. Obviously, FaZe is a team that considered somewhat in disarray. Like they've brought in a Dren, Nico's still the in-game leader. Yep. Debatable how well that's been going aside from him individually. Like I've got to give him credit individually, the guy's still a fucking monster, it's ridiculous. But as an in-game leader, I don't think he's been doing such a great job. But I will say, what I find bizarre about this as a matchup though, is like, if you look at, bearing in mind, obviously, like, Astralis, Team Liquid, like, these are the top teams. These weren't going to be the teams NaVi was playing. There's very few matchups in the quarterfinals where anyone should have been able to beat the NaVi team. But I actually think FaZe is the worst draw they could have gotten. And one of my factors as to why is when you do play in your NaVi, not only do you rely upon star players, like, as we're saying, Simple, obviously, but then, probably Electronic as well. Well, first of all, FaZe is one of the only teams that has people who can also hit those levels. Like, you really can have a game where Nico or Guardian, we know it's happened many times where they go to the same level. So, first of all, you can initially meet that factor. And then on the other end, that's where I think FaZe is so dangerous, because FaZe doesn't have bad players generally. I know Adren's not in very good form at the moment, but if he's your worst player, you've got a pretty fucking good lineup of players. And so the difference is when you're in scenarios where Edward or Zeus is going against these guys, they're in a mismatch. And in fact, if I remember the Epicenter final that FaZe won over NaVi, FaZe was very cynical, Moses. They were literally like trying to pinpoint attacking Zeus. Exactly. So for example, that's why on Mirage in that final, I remember, NaVi was even preemptively trying to make Simple go there because they knew that that's what was going to happen. So like, that's very rare that tactic can properly work against a top team. Usually you don't even try it because it's almost so gimmicky. But you actually can sort of make that work against NaVi. And in fact, the impetus of knowing that Simple and people like that are going to go nuts makes you tunnel on that more. Because you think, right, well, if he's going to go off anyway, let's make sure we've shot Zeus and Edward the fuck down.
I think it matters most. That kind of a strategy, if you bring it in, it's going to matter on map. Because I think there's some maps where you can kind of hide a player that's deficient in like a heads up duel. Like on a map like Mirage, that relies so much on rotations. Like if you rotate to that B bomb site, you're kind of pretty much out of position anywhere you go to get back towards A. Like if you rotate through window, there's danger and your vision is limited. You got to go all the way to CT spawn, which takes time. The only place you'd really go is catwalk, which is going to be Molotov or smoked. Like train is the same kind of thing. Zeus plays inner. You can really exploit him there. But like if you put him on like nuke, which I don't know if that would ever happen. But like there are maps where you can. Yeah, but like I just using as an example is there are maps where you can hide it a little bit better.
And that's the other factor as well, is like actually, like NaVi, part of them dropping off is their map pool's got a bit worse actually. And so I don't think the map pool will end up being terrible here for FaZe. I think they'll have a shot. I personally will take NaVi to win it. I'll still say that, like when you have players as good as they have at their top peak, you should win.
I think the biggest thing that I see from FaZe is I get this feeling that Yanko coming in as coach, I feel like they're trying to implement a long-term solution that's going to help them in the short term. And we'll see if they can pull it off. We'll see if it makes them better like a couple months down the road. But it feels like they are going to start trying to implement a system and being a little bit more tactical minded. I think that team when
the T sides have been a bit ass at the moment.
Yeah. But I think part of that is the learning curve and like, the learning mistakes of trying to implement a new system on your T side that is a little bit more structured, that adds a little bit more depth than just go out and frag somebody and then we'll play the mid round, because they're not getting that anymore. I don't think like those players as well, much like the French players, have dropped, or the rest of the skill and the rest of the league has risen. Whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to say, you're not going to see many times Olaf just go somewhere on the map and be able to take a heads up fight and kill two people. So you have to go more strategic. And I think in the short term, that is going to hurt them. But if it works out long term, they can be a dangerous team again.
Yeah,
and I think that's kind of the transition they're in.
It's a long time since we've seen the FaZe snowball, as I call it, in my opinion, at least. Like, they haven't had these games up until now where they've just seemed untouchable, and no matter which side you go to, you're going to get shut down by someone making a 3K. And I think if FaZe can pull that form off for the playoffs, then they're really scary. And as you said before, Thorin, I think it's also really good. Like what's going on for FaZe in the plus side of the department is that they have so many skilled players. So if you can utilize that in a game against NaVi where they might have some weak individual players, then that's definitely the upside for FaZe, because I don't see FaZe as a better tactical team than NaVi, and I don't think they have a better system either. So it's going to be all up on the individuals for FaZe, and I think a guy like Rain and Olaf hasn't shown anything of what they're capable of. So for me, it's going to be a lot up to the individuals on FaZe, and for NaVi, I think it's going to be more of the team play aspect that's going to carry them through, actually.
Right, let's make then, the last team we'll talk about is Team Liquid, because we haven't really addressed them so far. Obviously a team that, again, 3-0'd. They haven't had to show us a whole lot. We're having to take into account the High by Power tournament as well, because it's the only other time we've seen them with Stewie in the lineup. Start us off, Moses. Where do you think Team Liquid is right now? Like, for a start off, can I just go ahead and, like, this won't come out probably till tomorrow. It depends on when I get it rendered. But I'm going to go ahead and assume, Moses, that at some point you are going to attempt to just say that Team Liquid's going to win the major and pull that off, right?
I don't know. All the other analysts.
Oh, wait, it's cut out completely. Say that again.
Yeah, you cut out.
All the other analysts are saying that Liquid's going to win this, so they're stealing my thunder, which kind of upsets me.
Yeah, exactly.
That's my shit. Get the fuck off my team. No, I mean, again, they're a top 2 team. I think their placing in the ranking is obviously perfect right now, number 2, which is where they should be. And I think they can obviously win this event. Will they? So I have 2 brackets in my head. I haven't done my pick'ems yet. I'm trying to decide which route I want to go. One of them has Astralis making it to the final and beating Liquid, and the other one has MiBR beating Astralis in the semifinal, and then Liquid beating MiBR. Okay. And I don't know which route I want to go quite yet, as of the time of this recording. But they certainly are a team that can be dangerous. The biggest thing is, like you said, their map pool against Astralis is just so dog shit. Like, it is like the nightmare scenario for a team that wants to play Astralis is Liquid's map pool. And that's an obstacle that's so difficult to overcome. And we saw them towards the end of last year desperately try and play Train against Astralis, because they were just like, finally, you know what, we can't beat them on Nuke, so we'll play Train. And their Train isn't super great. So, which, by the way, is also a little bit of a banana peel for the matchup against ENCE. That's going to be, I think there's upset potential there as well. So I think Liquid certainly can make this final and win this final, but will they? I think there's a lot of things that have to go their way, and we just haven't seen a lot with Stewie. I'm really worried as well, this time off that they've had from going 3-0. Like, we saw them in London peak at the wrong moment and then come out flat in the playoffs. And if that happens again, they're screwed, you know? So this team is shown to be susceptible to that a little bit. Yeah. I feel bad I don't have like a convincing answer. Like, in my head, I haven't made a decision yet of what I think is going to go down.
Valde, what do you think?
I think this Team Liquid is probably the best Liquid we've ever seen.
That's for certain,
I'm really positively surprised by this Liquid team, also from practicing against them and just seeing them in the official games. I think the one thing they have going for them is they obviously beat Astralis at the Hyper Power Masters to take the trophy, and also they have a new coach. And I'm actually not sure what Adren is doing on the team. Like, not in terms of if he's supposed to be there or not, but more like what does he bring to the table? You know,
he's very strategic. He's purely strategic.
And if they can take this strategy and implement it into the game in the sense that they can actually gain something from it, instead of just like, there's difference between knowing what you're doing and then actually taking advantage of it, you know. So it's fine that they know what Astralis is doing, but if they can't like utilize this knowledge, then it's pointless, you know. So if he can bring something new and fresh to the table, and the players are performing well in playoffs, then I can definitely see Liquid winning this major. But I think Liquid is like this team who's like jack of all trades but master of none, you know. And if you're going up against Astralis, let's say in a grand final, I think you're just going to be down from the get-go. Obviously, from the previous match history, you're going to favor Astralis already, but Liquid has like a good in-game leader, but not the best one. Really good star players, but not the best ones. Good AWPer, but not the best one. And you see where I'm going is once you face a team like Astralis, who just has you beat on like pretty much all parameters, I just see you losing the game. So unless they can find a level that I haven't seen before, you know, they need that extra 5%, you know. And if they can somehow bring it out with this new coach, then I'm actually all for them winning the major, because I think they've been working really hard.
Sure. One thing I actually like is, even though on a past episode of Counterpoints, I actually did speculate like maybe Stewie 2K was the type of player they should pick up. I purposely said like type, like not necessarily literally Stewie 2K. To be fair, I wouldn't have had it be for tackle. I was going to have it be for like Elijah or something, you know, one of those type of moves.
You bring some confidence, right? Like
sure.
And
I think if you even look at this team now, like that was actually one, as bizarre as it sounds, that was almost a downside for their team last year. Is that like actually the overall team system they had was good, but when you ran it into Astralis, it was like exactly the sort of style that Astralis did amazingly against. Whereas that's why I think like adding Stu 2K has had a bit of a wrinkle here for Team Liquid that I like, is like Team Liquid, they've now moved a little bit more towards, they've obviously got like a super skilled lineup. In fact, arguably, probably aside from FaZe, who's got a better lineup than this? They've got the most skilled players you get in NA pretty much. There's a lot of talent. So they've already got an interesting little addition in that sense if they go against the likes of an Astralis. I even have noticed that if you add in iBay Power Masters and this tournament, they have tried to change their map pool. Like they're playing Overpass now, I notice. Yeah. They already tried One Dust 2 when they played it at iBay Power Masters. So it's already getting so that like they've evened up some of the mismatch that there was in that map pool. So the problem here is I can't really give you any factor that would make them win against Astralis, but I do think they've actually got a better matchup. My question is whether or not they're going to have a better matchup against all the rest of the field. I don't know that yet. Like that's the tough part, because the other part is before I could be pretty confident Team Liquid could beat the rest of the teams. Like if you had them against FaZe or NaVi, yeah, I'd say they'll win that game. But then I knew they'd lose to Astralis. Maybe they've given up some to get with the other. I'm not sure.
I think if Liquid's going to beat Astralis in this major, I think Stewie has to have a good game. Because if you look at the teams who have knocked Astralis out of some tournaments, like if you think back to like NaVi, who beat them a couple times towards the second half of last year, one of the things that was so frustrating for Astralis playing against NaVi was they felt like NaVi was just playing so randomly that they couldn't actually read it. They were like, yeah, we'd go back and watch the demos of the games we lost against NaVi, and for no reason, like they would have gathered no information on the map, but they would stack like 3 people into a bomb site, and it's just like they're just playing coin toss. So I mean, a weakness of Astralis, if there is one, and it's not that they're bad at it, it's just, you know, one of the things that you can use to defeat them is sometimes struggling at addressing like very random things happening on the map. And if you look at Team Liquid and you look at Stewie, one thing he's very good at is creating random chaos and just creating a problem somewhere on the map by making a play. And that's what I talk about when I say, you know, Liquid's always needed someone who is going to come onto this team and have some kind of a confidence and some kind of a swagger that he can make something happen. Zeus kind of brought that in the coaching role. Taco kind of brought that, but Taco's not that kind of impact player who's going to make some kind of crazy play, sure, make something happen on the map. Stewie is exactly that player who is designed, and like his entire game was introduced as this random crazy player who isn't going to be afraid to do something in a weird situation. So I would imagine that Stewie maybe not have blow up like, you know, mind-blowing numbers, but he's going to have, you know, 3 or 4 rounds in that map in a series where he just changes the way a round is played.
There's also the factor as well that, like, obviously now, due to having so many good players, it's not like when we were describing before with NaVi, etc. You don't even have to necessarily pick 2 players. Like, they've got so many good players. Anyone can have a great game. It's probably more depending on what the map is and what their position is, I'd assume. So, in a sense, I actually kind of like that to offset the nerves angle, or the fact that, you know, none of these people have won a major or won many big tournaments. Like, that's kind of not necessarily a bad way to go about kind of addressing that.
I think as well, by the way, this Team Liquid team, just from talking to them at this event,
they have that again. Say that again.
The Team Liquid that I've seen at this event and like doing interviews and walking around and when I've talked to them and everything, they have that same confidence that they had in London that everyone about, that got everyone saying that they were going to win the London major and how they looked there and how they were finally ready to overtake Astralis. They lost that towards the end of last year and they have it back here at this event. I mean, for whatever that's worth to whoever's listening, it doesn't, you know, but I'm not going to say it's the deciding factor.
But that's actually a point I would like. That's something I don't agree on, in the sense that Liquid seems to be a team that peaks too early, if you know what I mean. Like, yeah, all the great teams and players in history knows when to peak. And Astralis has been famous for actually losing games early on in tournaments and not peaking at the wrong time. And then when you hit playoffs and finals, obviously, then that's when they're at the highest point, you know. So if Liquid's or if Liquid seems unbeatable in the groups or initial stages of a tournament, that's actually something that has me worried, because I'd rather see that form in playoffs rather than in groups. So to me, that's actually a bad sign for Liquid, as weird as it sounds.
Well, the thing is, if you actually look in history, so like there's been a lot of people over the whole history of esports who were stuck in the same spot as Liquid was last year, where you come second a million times and you don't ever get the big breakthrough. Well, actually, if I had to pick out, I'm only talking about great players who did this, not like people who did it as a one-off at 2 tournaments or something. The players who do that, it's usually the exact same trend, actually, which is they tend to be amazing in semi-finals. Like, in fact, that's the mad thing. It doesn't matter how many times they fail the final, because the next time they get to the semis, they'll like destroy the team there because they're so driven. They're like, it's not going to happen again. That you even start buying into it. Like, you know what, even though they failed the last 3 times, I kind of feel like they can do it this time. But then in the final, when they don't show up in their top form, it just kills it completely. Like, I kind of see the premise where you're coming from there. Because like that is also something to do with being a veteran, to be fair. It's like you have to kind of pace yourself mentally. It's the reason why fans will never understand why, if you're an expert or an analyst, it's a really bad sign if you're in like the best of one at the beginning of the tournament and your players are going absolutely apeshit over every like small 1v1 you win, and like they're going totally crazy, because it's like, guys, you're not going to maintain this energy the whole tournament. Like if you think you're going to be able to do that for the whole event, it's like you're probably not. Like there's almost like a mental stamina that is involved in the game as well.
Yeah, I think it's because it is kind of a weird concept when you're just playing a video game, but you know, I don't think the average fan who doesn't play this competitively and doesn't pour hours into it of practice, like the mental focus is so exhausting that like not only are you expending energy, you know, jumping out of your chair every single round, but it just takes energy away from being able to stay focused and, you know, doing what you need to do and play a smart game. I think people really underestimate that, which I don't even necessarily blame them for, because at the end of the day, it is that silly thing that the mainstream always says, where it's like, it's just a video game. Like you wouldn't expect that you'd get exhausted from it over the course of 2 days, but you do. It's weird.
This video and all of the content on my channel is kindly supported by Dean Tanglis, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, Gardner Wilson, James Harding, OllieJ, Tobias Bernasconi, NateDOhDoubleG, Travis Greb, Tristan Jones, and as always, a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to take part in an esports discussion with yours truly? Would you like teasers for some of my upcoming content, see who the guests are going to be? Do you want to ask me a question for my monthly video AMA? Perhaps you'd like to suggest a guest you'd like to see in my content, or a topic to discuss. Well, if so, then put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.